All right. We are here live with Dr. Jarrod Spencer. Jarrod, how you doing today?
Feeling great.
Great. So for all the listeners out there, Jarrod and I have not connected very much leading up to this call. So a lot of this information, a little bit of background for Jarrod is sort of new for me. So with that being said, and new for the listeners maybe as well. That being said, Jarrod, why don't you hop in, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your path to where you are today.
Sure, yeah. I'm Dr. Jarrod Spencer. I'm a sports psychologist, and I lead a little company called Mind of the Athletes, where we're really passionate about improving the emotional health and performance of athletes. I also authored a book called Mind of the Athlete: Clear Mind, Better Performance. I travel the country as a speaker, teaching athletes and business leaders how the mind works best.
Cool. So I'm going to call you Jarrod if that's okay with you,
I tell everybody to just call me Jarrod. Now, after that formal introduction, I'm just a guy named Jarrod who knows a little bit about the mind, and I love helping people, so that's where I keep it.
Just a guy named Jarrod. All right, just a guy named Jarrod. So you've been doing a lot of work with athletes, and I learned about you because of some of the work you were doing with Syracuse, I believe, and it was
Sure.
surrounding athletics, athletic development, sports experiences, but with a little bit of a focus on technology, mindfulness, and awareness. So why don't you kind of open that up a little bit? Tell myself and the listeners what prompted that. What made you start to realize that this type of work or this type of focus was important today?
So my real passion is mental health. And as I try to solve the mental health epidemic in America, which of course I'm never going to be able to resolve or solve, but as I passionately study it, all the roads pointed to the sleep deprivation in America is really what's exacerbating the mental health concerns that we're seeing. Okay, well, what's driving the sleep epidemic we have in America? Well, really, it's the cell phone addiction. And with most people lying in bed at night on their phones with the blue light, looking through social media, hours of sleep is significantly decreased. And so when I put it all together, I said, if I really want to help mental health, I've got to work with sleep. And if I want to work with sleep, I've got to work with cell phones. And therein lies the path back to technology.
Got it. So what are some of the things that people can do? You mentioned blue light, but what are some of the things that people can do to improve the quality of sleep they're getting, and then maybe to set themselves up for some habits where they're just getting the right amount of sleep as well?
Sure. One of the things I say is this. Every night, there's a big yawn that comes over us. Usually that yawn is about an hour before you would ideally go to bed. And so according to Dr. Nicholas Hall, when that yawn comes over us that hour later, we want to shut things down at that point in time. We want to begin to turn off electronics, turn the lights down, maybe take a shower, have a very small light snack, maybe read a book for pleasure. But the point is, when the brain releases the melatonin, we want to do everything we can to allow the melatonin to do its job.
Right.
Unfortunately, what we have is a culture and society where as soon as that release of melatonin comes, that big yawn comes each night, most people say, oh man, I gotta push through this, man. I gotta suck it up. I gotta send more emails. I gotta get more done. What ends up happening is we blow by that ideal time that we would actually fall asleep. We catch our second wind, and now we're up for about another hour and a half.
Right.
That repeated pattern has led most people to chronic fatigue, just sleep deprivation, feeling tired.
Yeah. So if I'm a parent, and I'm assuming we're going to have a lot of parents listening to this, Jarrod, how can I motivate or inspire or get my child, let's say he's a 15-year-old male, maybe, and he's an athlete, besides telling him all the things that he could do, or the things that the reasons why he needs more sleep, like, do you have any suggestions for maybe some actionable ways to inspire their kid to get more sleep and some of the things that they can do?
So the solution to all of this is not one that adolescents are happy to hear me talk about.
Okay.
But I believe that in every house in America, there should be a cell phone electronic charging station in the master bedroom on the far side away from the bed. And every night, maybe it's 9 o'clock, maybe it's 10 o'clock, whatever it may be, that the parents determine all electronics are shut off and they're all in that station. If that would occur, let's say it was 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, then I believe that our students, our 15-year-old boys you mentioned, would be able to fall asleep easier, get more rest, get more recovery, and protect himself from a lot of the negativity that's going on social media that he would be looking at. So
Right.
the best thing is family charging station.
Yeah, love that. Heard it before, but I think it needs to be said again and again and again. And more companies are coming out with charging stations that that keep that in mind. They're sort of like family charging stations, which I think is awesome. Now, how does sleep, or does sleep, or the lack thereof, does that impact the ability for an athlete to perform on the field?
Absolutely. And here's a couple reasons why. We have typically 4 stages of sleep. There's REM sleep, then stage 1 and 2 is light sleep, stage 3 and 4 is deep sleep. Stage 3 is really muscle repair. So whatever you broke down as a football player today is going to be repaired in stage 3. In stage 4, that's muscle regrowth. So if you had a good workout, that's really where the muscles regrow. So the more stage 3 and stage 4, you're going to have less injuries and healthier longer.
Right.
So an athlete is sleeping 8 to 10 hours a night, or an athlete is sleeping 6 hours, which the average football player is sleeping about 6, maybe 6.5 hours a night. What we're going to see is across the season, week 7, week 8, 9, 10, which one do you think is going to come out a little bit better off?
Guys getting a little more sleep. Yeah. So it's very much, if you want to maximize the benefits from all that time you're spending, eating right in the weight room, it's just a matter of getting that more, restorative sleep.
It makes sense, right? Logically. And yet I speak to thousands and thousands of college student athletes about this and give them all the science and the wisdom behind it. And yet when I explain it to them, many of them, when I follow back up later, it's like, so are you making some of the adjustments? Are you going to bed consistently? Or have you put the cell phone away from your bed and stopped using it an hour beforehand? Sadly, the answer oftentimes is, no, I understand what you're saying, and I really want A's and B's, and I want to perform better, and I want to be all league, and I want to start, but I want my cell phone more.
So you're saying that the kids
they just want to look at social media.
You're saying the kids like their cell phones nowadays more than sleep? Apparently so. Yeah. Why do you think, Jarrod? Why are these cell phones, these smartphones, these video games, technology? Why is it so alluring?
Dopamine. And so the creators behind these things are brilliant, and they know, as we all do, that the more you can get an individual's brain to give them a hit of dopamine, the better off they're going to become dependent upon it.
Right.
So, for example, if you play any game on your phone, you'll hear the bells and the whistles and the chimes, and you might even get a notice from them saying, hey, you haven't played your game in 2 days, and why don't you come on back? And so all of the dinging and the buzzing and the lights and the rewards gives us a little hit of dopamine.
Yeah.
And eventually we get used to what's called the dopamine drip. And little by little by little, we've got an entire generation of young people who have grown up with the cell phones used to getting that dopamine drip.
Yeah, I hear a lot about this. Jarrod, how does the idea of this dopamine drip manifest itself in potentially other ways for the athlete? And I say that like, if they're used to, I think some would consider this dopamine, they would associate it with like instant gratification. But like, how does this idea of instant gratification, how might that work against an athlete that needs to focus on a process over an extended period of time in order to improve? Does the idea of instant gratification, does that hurt the ability for a team or an individual to progress over an extended period of time?
For some, it really can. Some, it really can. It can take away that drive. Why do I really want to go to practice and work really hard to get that release of dopamine when I could just play Xbox and I can get it a little bit of time that way? Yeah. And so for some, it can undermine, not for all, but for some, it can undermine the motivation.
When you work with teams, Jarrod, do you ever like work with the team or the individuals on the team on like how they can be better at using technology mindfully, like as a team? And I think about like, a bus ride, right? Like, oh, like that would be a great time instead of, everyone listening to music, maybe like we should take that time to connect. But like, what are some things that teams can do within a culture environment to improve connection and be a little bit more aware of what technology could be doing to hurt connections within the team?
Sure. Well, one professional team that I served had a place where as soon as any athlete came in, they had to put their cell phone right there in a specific slot
Love that. Yeah.
and visible to everybody, and we knew who had their cell phones there or not. And so,
Yeah.
but certainly in pro sports, it can be mandated. But I thought that was a great example. In college sports, one college team I worked with, they had a basket that said no distractions above it. And as soon as the girls walked into the locker room, they would have to put their cell phone in that spot. And that worked really well for that year. But unfortunately, the very next year, the captain's leadership of the team decided that they didn't want to do that anymore. And they felt like they should have their cell phones in their lockers. So, of course, then it caused more distractions and they were able to check things. But I think that's a little harder to regulate for college athletes, although still a little bit possible because there's scholarships some, and so that a little bit more control there. For high school athletes, taking away their cell phone on the bus ride, that causes more pushback.
Yeah, I've actually been talking with a professional baseball organization who's interested in the work that I'm doing, and we've sort of combined forces a little bit to start laying the foundation for doing a study looking at the presence of technology and the presence of maybe some technology awareness curriculum and how that might translate itself to improve performance on the field. Do you believe that teams that do use technology less, maybe individually and collectively, like while they're on or around the sports field or court, do you think that they could potentially perform at a higher level than teams that were using a lot of technology?
Yeah, I believe so, and here's the reason why. Everything I talk about through Mind of the Athlete is based upon our signature concept of clear mind, better performance.
Yeah.
The clearer a person's mind is, the better they're going to perform. And we know that the research is pretty clear that the more time a person is on social media, the more depressed they're actually going to feel.
Right.
So if we want to decrease depression, let's decrease social media. That's just one small example. The other is this. Social etiquette. Relationships are really developed through eyeball to eyeball, face to face, verbal communication,
right,
as we engage with each other. And so when we put the cell phones away on a bus trip, when we don't have them out at the dinner table, when we actually converse over a meal, relationships are built. And that brings about trust.
Right.
So when you compete on the field next to your brothers or your sisters out there, it's very important that you have that inherent trust.
Right.
And that comes from communication, comes from relationships. And the electronics, while it could still foster it to a certain degree, it's not nearly as efficient or effective as putting the phone away.
Yeah. And you mentioned, putting the phone away in a communal charging station for the family. I'd like to think that, one of the other benefits in addition to getting more sleep is you're going to have better family connection too during that time. Maybe you guys play a board game or you just sit around and talk. But certainly I think, we're feeling a lot of that downtime with just kind of picking up the phone when we could take that time to just connect and build relationships.
In fact, this may sound a bit dramatic, but I've been speaking about this and even produced a CD about it. The cell phone is our generation's cigarettes.
Yeah.
And that years from now, history is going to look back at us and they're going to say, you didn't think that this thing was going to cause all these health problems?
Right.
That people that smoke cigarettes said, what's the problem? My doctor prescribed it to me. It can't be that bad, right?
Yeah.
And so we're going to see how it's causing problems. And one of the biggest ways it's causing problems now is emotional intimacy in marriages and relationships.
Right.
Two individuals will lie in bed at night just looking at their phones as opposed to talking to each other.
Yeah.
And so it's got a ripple effect beyond just physical, but it's very much hitting the emotional.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Jarrod. I use that analogy with smoking a lot when I talk about it with people. I'm like, oh, I'm starting this new venture, and it's very, it's very similar to how, with cigarettes, everyone was smoking them back in the day. No one knew about the harms. Just like the first 10 years of smartphones, really nobody knew about the harms, but more research and more things are surfacing every day about the harms of it. So, obviously in time, research started to come out about cigarettes, and then people started to do things. Governments started regulating the companies. At what point, or what do you think is going to need to happen here, Jarrod, for there to be a shift in the climate of how society utilizes technology and smartphones?
Yeah, I think it's going to be generational. And so these type of problems don't simply shift easily once a generation's kind of engrossed in it. It
Right.
almost takes like the next generation behind them to begin to make the necessary changes. So part of it is the reality, which I don't see this thing shifting swiftly, but maybe as we advance 5-10 years from now, and there's more research, there's more data, there's more science, and a younger generation of kids grow up without going to bed with their cell phones.
Yeah.
50% of fifth graders that I polled recently at a school all fall asleep playing video games on their phone.
Yeah. Wow.
So I think that generation, when elementary schools, for example, are not having their kids fall asleep with cell phones, I think then we'll begin to see a generational shift. But that's gonna take some time.
Yeah, I sort of feel, I don't know if I feel bad, but I it kind of sucks for the iGen or Gen Z of today, because their parents, the Gen Xers, they were parenting at a time, it was like when the cigarettes first came out. They didn't know any better, really. But I'd like to think that the millennials and the kids of millennials, we don't even know what this generation is called. I have a 2-year-old. I would like to think, and I'm wondering if you agree, that maybe the kids of millennials, the generation below Generation Z, might be a little better off, if you will, because we're just a little bit more aware because of all the research that's come out in the last few years. Do you agree with that?
I do, and here's why. The root of the whole problem is right here.
Right.
My generation, Generation X, and those older than me, we had the work ethic of the past generations, right? And that was honorable and valuable. And I like to think that my generation prides itself on having really great work ethic.
Right.
But for the first time in human history, my generation has met up with a technology that it's no longer able to keep up with. And so despite my work ethic and those of my generation, we can't outwork technology. For every email you send, some studies I've seen have said you get 1.4 in return. I mean, do the math. You'll never get to the bottom of your inbox, right? And so my generation is the one that's staying up late at night trying to get one more email. Millennials look at Generation X, my generation, and their rebuttal to our criticism that they're lazy, that they don't have work ethic, they say, you guys are miserable and we don't want to be anything like you.
Right. Yeah.
Touche, right? I mean, true. And so because our work ethic can't keep up with it. And so most of the kids today look at mom and dad lying in bed. 90% of the parents that I poll are in bed with their phone, looking at it. And so how can they expect their kids to put their phones on a charging station when they themselves are still trying to pop off one more email?
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a conundrum, right? Because, you want your kids to be off it, but you yourself, you're tied to it. So it really, it requires, the family to sit down, maybe have that good family meeting and say, hey, we're going to change the way that we use technology. Have you guided any families, or have you seen any families kind of do that successfully and make a pivot?
Absolutely. I hear it all the time as I'm out there speaking. One of my most popular speeches I give is on sleep, the number one factor in performance. And really it blends in a lot of the cell phone and technology and how that's implicated with mental health. And so I just saw a woman today who said to me, I implemented a family charging station, but I'm the only one putting my phone on the charging station.
Yeah, right.
But then I got another inquiry or comment just the other day from a family who said, thank you, you saved us. We all put it there and we all do it now, and it's worked out a lot better for all of us.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how for some it's different, and for some it's more powerful than the science and the wisdom that we're trying to share.
Yeah. So getting back a little bit to, what you're really truly passionate about, like the core of it, Jarrod, is mental health. And I think we could all agree there's nothing more important, even more so than physical health. There's nothing more important than your mind and mental health. So let's say, the listener out there who, their kids have anxiety, but they're getting enough sleep. Maybe they don't believe that sleep is causing their family or their community mental health issues. What are some other reasons that you've observed, or other ways that this ubiquitous technology adoption is causing the decline in mental health?
I believe that my generation as well wrecked youth sports in America.
Yeah.
Something that was so good when we were growing up is really, for lack of a better term, just trashed right now.
And why is that?
Because come with me to any Little League soccer field in America this weekend, and I want you to watch the game. And what you'll see are beautiful 8-year-old kids running around, having a wonderful time kicking a soccer ball. And then you'll have this intensity of emotions coming from the sidelines, from moms and dads and coaches. And what it's done is it's almost like Pavlov's dog. If you remember that experiment in psychology, show a steak, ring a bell, dog salivate.
Yeah, get conditioned, yeah.
Yeah, what we have is moms and dads are too busy to coach soccer, but they can get there for the games. And when they do, little Susie, who had a lot of fun at practice, shows up for her game, and suddenly dad is 2 inches off the sidelines at that exact location on the field where Susie's playing. And whenever the ball comes anywhere near Susie, dad erupts with a loud voice, kick it, kick it, kick it. And Susie's, what was that?
Right.
And now she's got anxiety of when it comes game day and there's a ball near me and dad starts yelling, I get this feeling. And that is everywhere in youth sports today, like we've never seen before. And there's pressure on these kids to go year round. And so what we've done is we've created an entire generation of young kids with high anxiety, in part, just one small part, but a significant part from sports.
And I mean, what about grades too? I mean, I would think that the cousin of that is, and probably even more so, is the desire to have your kids excel in school and get that full ride to Stanford. Can you speak to the pressures on kids nowadays to excel in school? I'll just give one quick example. I was out in Michigan with my wife, and I was talking to a teen who's like, she's like you, she didn't me, and like she was really interested in helping teens with mental health. And we started talking. She was like, I was like talking about grades, and she's like, we have like multiple people with perfect GPAs and perfect SAT scores. Like, and even one of the kids at the dinner that night had like a 4.99 GPA. And I was like, when I was growing up, that was absurd. You never heard that. Nowadays, it's like almost normal to have a perfect GPA. What is this all about? What's causing this? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's well, quite frankly, I think it's a lot of, again, I'm putting a lot on my generation here today, but I think a lot of my generation who had the unfulfilled dreams of the success in sports, and now they go and put that on the next generation. And so they believe that you can outwork and do all these things and provide all the opportunities for the kids to have success in their sports and academics can lead to this. It's really become mass paranoia is what it is.
Yeah. It's
mass paranoia. People today think that everyone's going to get the scholarship to college, but the reality is there's 10 times more academic scholarships than athletic. So why spend less time on just athletic?
Right.
When it comes to school, the pressure is coming top down. There is more pressure on teachers now to make sure that their students are hitting their marks.
Yeah.
And there's more transparency and all that with testing and scores. And so the stress that's coming from the states to the superintendents to the principals to the teachers eventually comes down to the students, and then that comes back to the parents. But of course, mom and dad are overextended, as we mentioned already, and overwhelmed from their own work and trying to keep up with technology, that we've now created this chronic presence of anxiety in the home.
Yeah. So I want to get back a little bit, make sure I want to drill a little bit deeper on what we think like the root causes of why. I guess we could just stay with Generation X, because I think that's going to be a large part of this listener base here. Like, what is causing Generation X to be so involved, or so? It's not that parents didn't care so much about their kids 20 years ago. I think there was probably equal care, but it's just showing up in different ways. What is really causing this? What do you think?
Well, part of it is this, that we have to look at this intergenerationally.
Yeah.
And what we know is that, is what Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation, those that saved us from the Great Depression and World War II. They had phenomenal work ethic, but they really weren't much on relationships and emotional intimacy and connectedness. And so then the baby boomers came along, and they're like, hey, we want to be better parents and have better marriages. And they did. They really worked on it a little bit more. They still had the same work ethic. But the reality is they too fell short in a lot of areas, in a lot of ways. So the Generation X, for example, comes along and they say, hey, look, we're going to be, even more engaged in talking about our feelings and paying attention to helping our kids achieve academic and athletic success. And so Generation X has done a great job with that. We see much more of dads engaged, and particularly, let's just focus on dads for a second. If we look at this intergenerational part from a dad perspective, dad's hands-on for the greatest generation, not so much. Baby boomers, a lot less. Generation X, okay, now dads are changing diapers and dropping kids off at school and participating in homework. And so I really think it's, as women are more empowered in the workplace as well, and there's more balance there in the inequality, what we're seeing is dads taking a more active role. And so can we blame that then on the dads and what they're bringing to the table? Maybe to a certain degree. But overall, the rise in anxiety is about a perfect storm of a lot of things that have all come together at just the right time to be impacting this Generation Z.
Yeah. I think a lot about, and I grew up in Menlo Park, California. It's right next to Atherton, which is like the wealthiest zip code in the entire nation. All the
neighborhood.
Yep. It's all the tech CEOs and I grew up
in that area as well.
A lot of them need help. There's a lot of great families. A lot of them just need a little more guidance. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But, when I was growing up, every day, then not a night would go by that I wasn't banging on doors or kids were banging on my doors. Hey, you want to go play some pick up basketball? You want to play some roller hockey? And now, I drive around the streets of Menlo Park almost daily and I literally cannot find any kids. And it's like, where did they all go? And my belief in some way is that, if we can just get kids to play like kids are meant to play outside, face to face, picking teams, arguing, I think that could make a big dent in this mental health crisis. Can you speak to like the current state of lack of play in America right now?
The Sandlot is dead.
Yeah.
And it's sad because, as that great movie, The Sandlot.
Oh yeah.
This is where social relationships were really developed. Social skill development occurred. This is where frustration management was learned as one played. You see, creativity comes from boredom.
Right.
And yet our kids are not bored, because if they're bored for 2 seconds, even if most adults stop at a traffic light for 2 seconds, they'll pick up their phone and look at it.
Yep.
And so we're lacking creativity because we're lacking boredom. And so the idea of free play, just going out there and doing things for fun, has become a bit of a lost concept.
Yeah.
And so one of the questions I ask parents of student athletes a lot is this: what percentage of your communication has nothing to do with academics or athletics? And oftentimes they'll say, as with the athlete, it's about 90%, about performance. Then I ask them, well, what hobbies do you like to do with your kids? What do you like to do for fun? Well, we don't have time for hobbies. Well, what do you like to do for your hobby? Oh, I don't have time for a hobby. I ask a kid, what's your hobby? What do you like to do? Oh, I don't have time for that either. That essentially fun, recreation, which means creativity, play, that's been removed because it's all based now upon performance.
Right.
I believe that, and I've seen some pretty cool information out there about how important play and recreation and hobbies are for releasing the pressure that we accumulate. It's a pressure relief valve, but we've taken that away.
So Jarrod, are you saying that a kid may perform better or may thrive come 20, 30, 40 by their parents focusing less on them being a high performer as a youth and just kicking them outside and say, go play?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of reasons why. I mean, most young people today are wearing out a particular body part because they have to play that sport year round if they're going to go beyond age 13. And so long-term ability to go for a run, for example, might be hindered because they've wore out their knee.
Right.
So overall health and well-being. And also we're trying to teach kids, young kids habits, healthy habits. And the most underappreciated healthy habit that I see in youth sports, high school sports, even college to a certain degree, is the value of rest and recovery. So recovery science is really on the rise, but it's not implemented for our young people. So they're just go, go, go. They're sympathetic nervous system. So your nervous system has two parts. Sympathetic, which is wakes you up, go, go, go. Parasympathetic, relax, relax, relax. What they have is this really well-developed sympathetic nervous system of go, 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 go. What they don't have is a well-developed parasympathetic, the ability to relax, relax, relax. So much so that the World Health Organization has now coined burnout as an official diagnosis.
Wow.
Because so many people, particularly Generation X, are literally burning out because they don't have rest, recovery outlets. So, and the generation coming up that we're raising is far more out of balance in their nervous system, sympathetic compared to parasympathetic. So if we can teach them rest and recovery and bring it back in balance, we'll see greater long-term health. Right now, the future is kind of ominous with that.
Yeah. So with sticking on this, I think that's a great point. Sticking on the idea of play, like, I'm thinking actionably now. Like if I'm a parent, yeah, probably, the obvious one is not booking them up with so many activities, right? I think there's like this, I have kids they're literally booked every day. It's basketball, Tuesday, Thursday, it's baseball lessons, Monday, Wednesday, they got Boy Scouts, they got something on Friday. How could parents create an environment that inspires kids to have more unstructured play?
One, turn off the internet.
Yeah,
just turn it off. That's one start. And
I bet the kids are they're just gonna love that, huh? No, they're gonna freak out.
Yeah, they're not gonna be fans of what I'm saying. That's one.
Yeah.
The second is we have to model it.
Yeah.
And so as parents, they are going to do what we do. And so that classic song, Cats in the Cradle, right?
Right.
And so they're going to do what we do. So if we model to them, hey, I'm reading a book for pleasure, or I'm going kayaking, or I'm going to go fly fishing this weekend, they will develop that. But I believe that the best way for us as parents to foster the creativity and the play is to model it to them. The other is, I believe very strongly that we need to take our kids out into nature, and particularly if we can, into areas where cell phone signals are very weak or not even existent.
Yeah.
And so there's something about getting in sync with nature's own rhythm that really helps us to begin to play again as well.
Yeah. Yeah. We do some retreats for kids, and we take them out to nature. And I think just the idea of just putting them out in the headspace for 48 hours where like they're just away from tech, playing with just a ball and people. The most common reflection was like, wow, like I had no idea I could have that much fun not being on technology for 2 days straight. And that in and of itself, of course, we're teaching them the habits and things like that, but that in and of itself is a total win. So my thinking, to your point, is like if parents or families can take their kids on a camping trip with no screens whatsoever, they could start to feel deep down that, hey, like I don't need to be so connected, because they saw how they could do it over the weekend.
This is exactly what we're talking about. So, obviously technology is wonderful, and I don't want to, of course, come across sound like I'm bashing it, because it's wonderful and it's great. That being said, it's all about balance. And so if we can begin to look at how it fits in the bigger picture of our lifestyle, generationally, what's going on here in America today, we can begin to make the small adjustments. And so maybe it's just the family vacation once a week in the summertime, or maybe it's the quarterly, hey, let's get away into nature. It may not seem like a big deal, but considering that we actually have very little of it right now, any small amount will make a big difference.
Yeah. I want to get back a little bit, Jarrod, back into your work with teams. I'm curious, like, at what point do you think teams or coaches might start to like implement things within their teams that start to make a difference, such as having like you mentioned, a basket or something where coaches put their, have their kids put their, stuff into a basket. But like, what's the next step there? Like, when is this going to become more widespread?
Well, what I've noticed in sports is that let's look at professional sports, is that there are some individuals in leadership that are very progressive and they're more open to ideas like this. But as long as the head coach is resistant, maybe then it's not going to be easily as incorporated. We have to have a leadership aligned right from the GM, assistant GMs, coaches, head coach, assistant coaches, where everyone's on the same page regarding the technology.
Yeah.
And if you actually have somebody disagreeing with the science of sleep or mental health or technology, then what you may see is a lip service. It's important to us to a small degree, but maybe not to a larger degree.
Yeah.
So I believe that it's going to take a top-down leadership model, the right alignment of individuals to take a theory, which we all, in theory agree to, but in practicality, we actually roll it out. That would be a special organization. And they're out there. I've seen them, served them, and I love that. But at the same time, there are others out there that are just not quite there yet.
Yeah, and what you're saying, Jarrod, something just came up for me a little bit, and I think we'll have a lot of Gen Xers listening that work for companies, small, medium size. I mean, in California here, a lot that work for startups. I was out in Michigan this past weekend. I was with family, and we were talking a lot about this stuff because I was unplugging, and they were like interested in it, and I didn't have my phone for 4 days, and they were saying like if I ever did that, like I would be fired instantly if I didn't respond to like emails right away. Like literally at this one company that a family member worked at said that like there's a mandate from the CEO that you have to be basically tied in all hours of the day on Slack, on email. So I'm kind of curious to your, similar to what you were saying about how sports teams in time may start to adopt an approach, it's got to come from top down. How might this translate to corporate America and company life and habits and expectations as far as email and communication goes?
We're starting to see the trend in other countries around the world that are taking the opposite approach that we have here in America.
Right.
So you can't send an email after 6 p.m.
Right.
We're starting to see schools say there's mandatory no homework over breaks, that we know that breaks are important. And people like you and I are recording podcasts and raising awareness on this because I believe that it's a critical mass is growing. And we're going to get to a tipping point soon here.
Right.
We're beginning to see things in reverse. And we start to say, well, maybe that's the way it was going because we thought it was going to lead to high performance, but it's really not. And so things go a certain way, then they go the opposite. Part of what's happening here is that a number of individuals in leadership in companies are leading their companies with the kind of work ethic that they maybe developed in sports as a kid in the 1970s, 1980s. But that work ethic is kind of a little bit more outdated now. So, for example, in the 1970s, 1980s, people would actually have 3-hour practices, and they wouldn't get water unless it was a reward. They would withhold water. Right?
Yeah, more. Work harder. Yeah.
Right. And so now we see people in business say they're chronically dehydrated. They don't drink enough water.
Yeah.
And the brain is 80% water. So if you want brain power, you need water.
Right.
We don't need to have super long meetings. We don't need to have super long practices. But you see, a lot of that mindset that they developed early on is still what's implemented. You'll get some guys who say, I can sit on my desk for 4 or 5 hours straight and just grind. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's impressive to you, but the body is actually going to perform better if we take lots of breaks and we stand up and we walk around, right?
Yeah, totally.
So they're just operating off outdated science.
Yeah.
So for those people, I always find that if they're open to learning, that's the key, and they're willing to listen to the science. Let me explain to you why this is a healthier, better approach. If we do it this way, then we got something to work with.
Yeah, I'd love to see. I'd love to do some of that work myself, working with companies, helping them, understand how maybe not going so hard and working so late into the night, it will impact, general happiness. They'll be able to get more sleep. Connections will be improved. Maybe if it's, hey, instead of emails when we're all at the office, let's go talk face to face. They can improve connections. I think that there's going to be a lot of work done in this space. And I agree. I've seen more happening overseas, particularly in Europe, who seems to be a little bit ahead of America as far as digital mindfulness elements.
So what we have then is who is going to get there first. And what I've noticed is there's a bit of a correlation with a younger generation.
Mm-hmm.
So to link this to mental health, and again, to sound a bit critical here, those people that control the money and are the biggest decision makers in companies tend to be those that are a little bit older, Generation X and above, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but we've grew up with this suck it up, don't whine, don't complain. We never had that, grind through it. We don't need that crap. Get that stuff out of here. We're fine.
Right.
Okay. One of the biggest barriers for mental health as a sports psychologist is I've got to find those individuals who don't have that mentality, who think differently, and who would say, no, absolutely, we'll fund what you do. We value your performance psychology and how it can help our company and corporation. But those individuals are still in the minority for those actually controlling the power and the money. Yeah. As those individuals begin to age out and a younger generation comes through, and I've also found this as well as with younger generations, more diversity, they're more embracing of mental health, and it seems like they're willing to put money to where their mouth is, to say, we'll actually value this enough to fund this. Yep. And we're going to deal with this. I think technology is right there on the heels as an integral part of mental health. And so the doors will open more as I believe mental health opens more as a younger generation gets power and control of decisions and money.
Yeah. So I think, love that response. I think, Jarrod, we could both agree that technology is a great tool. Like, we wouldn't be communicating right now face to face in real time across the country if it wasn't through technology. I learned about you through searching on the internet. So it's a great tool. So like, I don't think we ever are sounding like that, but I don't think we would want to position ourselves as like so doom and gloom, like throw your cell phone away, like video games are never okay. But with that being said, like, how can technology be leveraged for good? What are some ways that you've seen people improve their quality of life through using technology in the right way?
Yeah, great question. So I think part of it is just families and being able to track kids. And so there's a lot of anxiety and worried about, hey, where's my kid? What are they doing? I'm like, you know where they're at. You just use the iPhone, find my phone, right? You can find out where they're at and what they're doing. And so a lot of ways, that's one example. Sports science is another example. A lot of athletes will wear a device around their chest or on their back, which calculates movements and scoring opportunities with other individuals on the ice in hockey, for example. And that data leads us to greater health and awareness of how do we work more efficiently as a team, when an individual needs a break or when they need to go a little harder. And so that kind of feedback is vital.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's, I also think about like, meditation apps and things like that, things that allow you to track nutrition. There's a ton of good. What are some of like the big red flags for you? Like some of like the big harms, or sorry, some of the biggest issues right now that, like, if you're a parent, a coach, a teacher, things that you'd really want to pay attention to, and how would you go about them?
Social withdrawal. I'm really concerned about an entire generation of kids who just want to sit on their couch and connect with friends via Xbox,
right,
and talk that way as opposed to meet up face to face. So I think the social isolation is one of the things that we really have got to be concerned about, because I think that could lead us further along. I think the other thing we want to look for is when we take technology away from a kid, like oftentimes there's a pretty intense negative reaction from that.
Right. Totally.
And how intense that negative reaction is a bit of how addicted, how dependent they really are on this. And when you detox a kid from it, oftentimes we're like, oh, voila, they're a much better version of themselves.
Right.
And I don't even say that, but getting them off of it. So how intense that reaction is when we try to remove technology from them for a little while is another significant red flag we want to watch out for, because obviously the more intense it is, the deeper the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned social withdrawal. And I think that's I was talking with Tristan Harris, who's like a thought leader in this space. And I was like, what's the solution? Like, what are we going to do? And he's like, I think the solution is just connection. Like, people just need to connect more. And I happen to agree. I think that if there was just more connection, more empathy, more social, emotional awareness about what you're going through, what other people are going through, be able to put yourself in other people's shoes, being able to be self-aware about, your own interactions, and then you're, able to get outside more and connect with others, call a buddy up, hey, you want to go to the park, yada, yada, yada. I think the connection is really what's going to make the impact on social, on where we're at today with mental health. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. In fact, to say more simply, I'd say emotional intimacy.
Yeah, I love that.
That's what we're missing from technology, is emotional intimacy.
Yeah.
And as we get more emotional intimacy, real connectedness, then we feel closer to people around us.
Yeah.
And there's more support. But if we're lacking the emotional intimacy because we're texting the person as opposed to just pick up the phone and call them, actually talk to them,
right,
then we're slowly robbing ourselves of this vital component called emotional intimacy.
Yeah, it's just like, it's so much easier for you to sit behind a phone and you had a terrible game, or you had a breakup, or you're going through something. It's so much easier to sit there and clear your head by playing some games or flipping through Instagram or even texting somebody. But it's a lot more difficult nowadays in general for you to actually like reach out to someone and talk about it. And that's why psychologists and therapists, they're so helpful, because it allows you to sort of air out problems. And I think that's being done a lot less nowadays.
It is. And then, to push this conversation one step deeper, I think that really there's another level of this, which is really spiritual intimacy as well, which is that what's happened in America is that there's less and less of the church spirituality. And so because of that, what we're seeing is that was one place where people would have a meaningful connectedness as well.
Right.
And so if we wrecked youth sports in America, and the educational system is full of high anxiety and pressure on everybody to perform, where else can we go in community where we could just be together? And it's not about achievement. It's not about something else. In fact, it might even be about service and doing and something greater than ourselves. And so that's really where spirituality steps into that space, where religion steps into that space. In fact, it's really the second step of the 12 steps, is come to realize the power that greater than myself can restore me to sanity.
Right.
And so what we're realizing is our young people today are missing but craving that piece to the puzzle.
Right.
And they're searching for it and yearning for it.
How can we bring back like the power of like these institutions, like the Boy Scouts and churches and synagogues? There just seems to be less of that, as there's more of just a focus on like achievement, like you said. How can we bring those back to relevance?
I believe, again, this is going to be a generational piece, that where Generation X is kind of adopting the mindset of, hey, we're open for whatever you want to explore and how that may look for you. And there's beauty and value in that, of course. But a lot of younger generations are saying, no, we want something more concrete. We want something. So how do we actually bring that back? Well, that's a greater solution than I could ever come up with. But one thing I do like is I do think that, at least across the country, you see one example would be the non-denominational Christian community popping up small churches that are less housed in cathedrals and more in more relaxed venues where there might be a school cafeteria, for example. But we see a lot of young people, particularly in the cities, flocking to such attendance because they realize there they've got the connectedness, the emotional connectedness, the real conversation, the eyeball to eyeball, face to face, meaningfulness, something greater than themselves, some way to serve a social justice movement. And so I see that as a critical ingredient in the process of helping us move forward in a healthier way.
Yeah, I'd love to see more of those types of and platforms and showing up for people. I mean, nowadays, even in like Menlo Park, like it's super densely populated. I wish I grew up in New York, and when I grew up in New York, there was this place called Zucker Park in New City, New York, and it was like there was a bunch of baseball fields, there was a snack shack, and that's just where we went to hang, like on weeknights. And it seems like nowadays there's less of these like community, forums or meeting areas for kids to like go and hang out. And so where do they go? They go hang out in Fortnite. They're not even playing Fortnite. They're literally just hanging out with their headsets on, just talking and hanging out in virtual spaces. So if there are these spaces where people can sort of connect and congregate and hang, if those were, those are more present, I think that could also make a dent in the mental health epidemic.
This is a systemic problem, as you're pointing out, and there's a community part to it, a spiritual part to it, an emotional part, relational part, an athletic part, an academic. And so as we begin to think about the perfect storm of how we ended up here, I think it's very important for guys like you who are thought leaders in this topic, and guys like myself who have platforms and voices to educate and give the actual skills, the techniques, like give me A, B, C, and D to do, which is I believe that we can begin to slowly change the trajectory of this ship.
Yeah, love it. So we're coming up towards the end right here. This has been a really rich episode here, Jarrod. I've really enjoyed connecting. You got a lot of good stuff to say. I agree. I think so when I first started getting interested in this was because I saw what was happening to my teens. They were very quiet and stressed out. They weren't hanging out. They weren't getting their licenses. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, why aren't they getting pumped up for each other? Why aren't they going to, and getting burgers after the game or like dogpiling after winning like an incredible, playoff game? Like what's going on? It just seems very detached. And I started to look around and I was like, the only thing that's tackling smartphone overusage technology attachment is these like discussion groups, and they're usually talking about like restrictions, and it's all restrictions based. And it's like, where's the game plan? Where's the actionable tips and strategies? Where are the habits? Where are the tools to implement a more intentional mindset as far as how we use technology? So with that being said, like what, you've given us a few, Jarrod, but can you give us a few more like of your go-to tips, tricks, strategies, whether you're a teacher, a parent, a coach, an administrator? What are some other good actionable things that we can do right now to make an impact on the teens of today?
Well, one thing that I do personally that's been absolutely vital to my own sanity and mental health is every single day before I start my day, I meditate.
Yeah.
And so my meditation is really more a form of prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I literally get on my knees and I stop and I pray through my day, pray for the people I'm going to meet with. I pray for the challenges that I have and the things that are outside my control. And I listen and I try to be quiet. And that act of really pausing in a position on my knees of like, I'm just surrendering and I'm really stopping the madness of the world of rushing out my bedroom to go start the day.
Right.
That act of the pause, I would sometimes call it the power of the pause.
Right.
Is something that we all have to incorporate, even if it's just 30 seconds at the beginning of your day before you rush out to start. Ideally be more, but the power of the pause through meditation, through prayer, is an absolute vital skill for us all to be practicing.
Totally. Is it possible to have kids 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 start to practice the ability to be alone with their thoughts, to be bored, to maybe even meditate or pray like that?
Well, the research is really growing where schools are beginning to implement meditation, breathing, quiet time, put your head down, think. And it's been unbelievably successful in lowering frustration and stress and helping them to achieve better scores. It's parasympathetic nervous system, which I spoke about earlier. It's just our bodies are craving just the ability to close our eyes and just stop
Right.
for just a moment. And so when we do that, however small that may be, its impact is profound.
Yeah. Mm. I kind of want to stop on that note just because there's such a beautiful way to end. So Jarrod, thank you so much for your time today. I genuinely really enjoyed our face-to-face communication here. It was a lot of fun. Jarrod, can you tell us a little bit more about where we could find you? You have some great resources online. I think you're primarily based on the East Coast, but where could our listeners learn a little bit more about you and get some more access to everything that you're doing?
Sure. Mindoftheathlete.com. And so
Awesome.
from there, you'll find information about my speaking as I travel the country. Was in your area of California before and love to get
Missed you. Yeah.
so love being able to get out there and educate. So my book, Mind of the Athlete, Clear Mind, Better Performance is also available on Amazon as well as our websites. I've got CDs, audio, digital download ones on cell phones and sleep and anxiety that one could also get from a store on the Mind of the Athlete website. And of course, like everybody, I got tons of social media out there at Jarrod Mind of the Athlete, so we can always connect that way as well.
Awesome. Jarrod, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I hope we can stay in touch as we continue to both go down and impact people, hopefully across the globe with this important work.
Well, David, you're doing great work there, and I really appreciate your platform and your heart for really serving and helping other individuals that are struggling in this area. It's necessary, it's vital. So I'd say to you as well, keep doing what you're doing. You're making a far greater impact than you could ever possibly imagine.
Oh, thank you so much, Jarrod. Appreciate it. And I hope to stay in touch. Talk to you soon.
For sure. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.